Black Righteousness Chapter 10 Part 1, Tallulah, Louisiana. Soon after, Wanyenyekevu quietly and peacefully drifted off to sleep. The sun rose the next day as the birds were chirping and the smell of honeydew filled the air. The sun pierced through the trees and woke him. He just laid there enjoying the sound and smell, staring into the sky, thinking about the past few days and how blessed he felt being chosen by Sabaoth. Now heading south, back on Highway 65, he slowly took his time admiring the scenery. Up ahead, he sees an old abandoned structure that appeared to have been a church at some time. As he approached the structure, the building and his surroundings became brighter, and bright clouds surrounded him. There was an old rusty sign on the building that read New Zion Church of God in Christ, but as he came closer, everything began to change. The grass turned green, the building transformed with a fresh coat of white paint, and the sign had changed to Crusade for Christ, 1183 Joseph Street. Wanyenyekevu opened the doors, and service had already started. People praised, sang, and worshipped Sabaoth. Wanyenyekevu was overjoyed. Sliding into one of the open spaces to join in, he found himself clapping and giving praise to Sabaoth. After an hour, two women approached the pulpit. You could tell they were mother and daughter. The daughter spoke. For centuries now, they have used and abused Sabaoth's people. Because of greed, many individuals continue to do so 50 years after abolishing the international slave trade. Stole our ideas and inventions for profit. She smiled as she continued. Imitated, but never duplicated. Yes, they used our very own skin to create shoes, clothes, and even purses. Lynched, whipped, and murdered us, gave us empty promises, destroyed Black Wall Street and New York's Central Park, treated us like animals and commodities, black gold, as you will. Used laws called black or slave codes. Yes, using deceptive means to create self-hatred and mentally destroyed the idea of marriage among us. The one great sin they have instilled in many minds is the corrupted and perverted ideas of sex. Are we beyond repair? God forbids. Centuries ago, slave sex farms were created. Like any other farms, they wanted the biggest and the strongest. Forced orgies, as they pervertedly watched, men having sex with their daughters, mothers having sex with their sons. This is where the MF word came from. They raped our men, women, and children and perverted our family values, but Sabaoth is able. Marriage, in the eyes of Sabaoth, is honorable when two virgins consummate their marriage. The blood from two virgins joining together for the first time makes that marriage holy. They have turned the natural into perversion, and perversion is now called natural. They are not ignorant, they know and knew that most people in the Torah are people of color. They know and knew that people of color, the more specifically, helped them become who they are today. They are as little children demanding to be seen, but their actions have done great damage and have caused the world to become as it is. It amazed Wanyenyekevu at how the two women spoke with power and authority as he took a seat and continued to listen and agree with the women. They have taken the word love and replaced it with lust. Through mind games and manipulation, many of our people have gradually become selfish, disingenuous, and rather lay on their back for physical pleasures than walk on their feet doing honest work. PTSD is embedded in our minds, and we have become animals instead of humans, and that was how they treated us. Her voice became louder as she continued. What we need to understand about racism and the white power dynamic so well understood by black scholars like Neely Fuller, Dr. Francis Cresswelsing, myself and others, is that it is not just the organs of its body, but it is the skeletal structure. You are still left with the framework when you remove the brick and mortar and all the internals. It is as my son Jamiron once argued so beautifully with his white college sociology professor, saying, even when you whites are not operating on prejudice, you are, by its very nature, and based on its implied, if not obvious imperative, operating on the standard of racism they teach you from birth. And that standard he mentioned is driven by a power dynamic established on white genetic survival. Until we get that and the fact that we, no matter where we are in the world, are seen and are a global black nation, whether or not we embrace it and are treated as such, and begin to think in terms of our common survival as does every other ethnic group that are evolving out of us, we will continue to be denied full equality and real freedom. A rock thrown in the pond will have a ripple effect that will eventually disturb the entire body of water. It was Mordecai who warned Esther in the Torah, art thou not a Jew? Meaning, what happens to your people will also happen to you. We may have gained freedom from slavery, however, freedom did not mean free from. The chains were gone, but the system they represented remained solidly in place. Take the drugs from the addict, his addiction remains. Until the mental dependency is broken, he is not free. The Native Americans understood this, which is why they demanded to be separate, equal, and sovereign citizens of their own country. Realizing that it was not about segregation but independence. Wanyenyekevu got so excited that he stood up and shouted, "All right." As she continued, they insisted on defining their status. They were hostages in their own land. So were we. It is not intelligent to ask your captor to dictate the terms of your acquired freedom. And it is not freedom if you have no choice. Many began to jump for joy as she spoke. Music rang out in the building, but there was no band or instruments. The mother stood up and started praising the Lord as well. She let out a large cry, saying, "Glory!" And the entire building shook from its foundation. Wanyenyekevu felt joy and peace and had to stand up. He closed his eyes and started praising Sabaoth. When he opened his eyes, he stood in an empty abandoned building, but the feeling was still there. Wanyenyekevu said as he shook his head. "Just like fire. I mean, just like fire shut up in my bones." Walking away from the building, he said, "Who was she?" And he heard a voice, "I'm prophetess Akilamelech." Looking around, he just smiled, "Thanks, Akilamelech, I had a great time, and I needed that." 50 feet from the building, she stood there with her mother on Highway 65 with a beautiful and peaceful smile. "You're welcome, and this is my mother, Pastor Jones." Pastor Jones smiled, saying, "Nice to meet you, Wanyenyekevu. Sabaoth needs you to know and remember that gradualism is how the evil one will try to destroy Sabaoth's people." She pointed toward Highway 65, and they all walked down the road as Pastor Jones continued, by slowly indoctrinating a plan into action until it becomes normal, like bestiality, necrophilia, and even homosexuality. During the early 1970s, homosexuality was a mental disease. Now, it is a way of life. It gradually became accepted by the 1990s. By 2000, it was a way of life. Thousands of years later, this world is just as or even worse than Sodom and Gomorrah, and above all, Sabaoth wants you to remember to hate the sin, not the sinner. For many are being deceived, misused, abused, and manipulated. Akilamelech turned toward Wanyenyekevu, "Remember this as well before we go. Man is the sixth extinction facing this planet. His greed and disrespect for nature and life is hurtling him towards the extinction of over 1 million species in the next decade or less." Chika said, "Except those days be shortened, no flesh will be saved." And so, it is. They continued until they were between Fleury Road and Omega Road on Highway 65. Akilamelech stopped and took out some olive oil. She and her mother prayed over the oil, and her mother poured it into her hands. Akilamelech said, "You are about to meet incubus and succubus. You will need strength to defeat your enemy. You must know your enemy in order to defeat them. Only through Sabaoth is this possible." She placed her hand on his head and prayed for him. He lifted his hands in the air and started praising Sabaoth. When he came down, they had disappeared. Wanyenyekevu felt like he was on cloud 9 as he continued to walk. He passed the old abandoned town of Tallulah and closed in on the bend before he finally got to Tallulah. Wanyenyekevu felt at peace since his talk with Akilamelech and her mother, all the while enjoying the scenery when he came across a sign that read, "Welcome to Tallulah." As he walked, he noticed the grass got greener as he approached the small town, and the street signs were repairing themselves, and he began to read them. Highway 65 changed into North Cedar Street. Passing Blair Street, McKinley Street, Roosevelt Street, then he came to a strange crossing. One side of the street, to the right, was called South Levy Street, but directly across from it, the name was Van Zelphen Street. He stopped and asked himself, why is this not North Levy Street on this side of the road, and who or what is a Van Zelphen? Maybe this guy Van Zelphen did something important? He continued as he passed North Street, East Washington Street, and East Auburn Street. He asked himself, what kind of name is Oborn? Shrugging his shoulder, he continued to pass East Darrow Street and East Craig Street. As he looked ahead, and saw Yael and Mletsi, above their heads was a sign that read East Green Street, Highway 80. Mletsi said as he approached, "This will be your time of reflection. And you're home for the next 90 days, and you will not see us again until it's time to move on. You will experience joy, hatred, fear, love, and anger in this place, but you will learn what is needed to help you finish your task at hand for Sabaoth while you are here, and this will only happen here. You will see echoes of time and echoes in time. It is one thing to hear of the stories and events that happen to your family, but it is another thing to see them." Wanyenyekevu started to speak, but Mletsi interrupted him. "If you stand in a location for a long time, you will see moments in the past, dealing with or concerning your family. These are called echoes of time. However, if you speak the words 'show me,' the same time will fast forward to their future until you say stop. These are called echoes in time." Wanyenyekevu smiled and repeated what he said, of time, the past. In time, future, understood. Standing in a location for a while, echoes of time in history. If I say show me. Echoes of time, fast forward to a later period. Wanyenyekevu said, "Hold on. What?" Mletsi continued, "In any case, echoes of time or echoes in time, you can say stop, rewind, fast forward, or even repeat, and the echoes will do so." Wanyenyekevu nodded his head, understood. "I think?" Yael looked at Wanyenyekevu, "Before you leave, the evil one will show themselves. Be strong. For you are now ready. There should not be a doubt in your mind when they appears before you. Remember, you cannot kill these deities as of yet, so don't try, but if you're not careful, they can bring the worst part of you out." Mletsi, pointing west, said, "There will be a meal waiting for you on Adam Street. This will be the last meal we will prepare for you. The flesh is feeble, and this is the reason for your hunger. You have been through a lot, and it is about to be over, and everything will return to normal." Mletsi and Yael bid their farewells and disappeared.